And pass the floor to the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.
Thank you, Madam President. At the outset, I would like to congratulate you on presiding over the Security Council during the month of April. I would also like to thank your predecessor, the permanent representative of Japan, and their team for the successful conduct of the Council's business over the past month. My delegation would also like to express thanks to the delegations of the Russian Federation and China for their effort to convene this emergency meeting of the Security Council. Madam President, in yet another episode in a string of Israeli attacks against my country, Syria, at about 5 o'clock Damascus time yesterday, the 1st of April, the Israeli occupation forces, in broad daylight, have launched a barbaric rocket aggression from the direction of the occupied Syrian Golan. It targeted the building of the consulate of Iran in the Meza neighborhood of the Syrian capital, Damascus. This barbaric aggression led to the destruction of the entire premises and the martyrdom and injury of all those inside, including Syrians and Iranians, in addition to a number of passers-by in that area. The targeted Iranian consulate building is located in a densely populated area. It's full of civilians. It's just a few meters away from the headquarters of foreign diplomatic missions and international organizations, including the World Food Programme. That, in addition to a private hospital, faculties affiliated with Damascus University, and a number of private banks and companies. This vital area is crossed by thousands of civilians on a daily basis, as it is an essential route in the city. Some of those civilians have suffered severe injuries because of this terrorist aggression, which constitutes a dangerous precedent. It is a grave violation of international conventions and norms that guarantee the protection and immunity of diplomatic premises and personnel, and the prohibition of any attacks against them, including the Vienna Conventions on Diplomatic and Consular Relations and the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Internationally Protected Persons, including diplomatic personnel. Madam President, over the past few days, these hysterical Israeli attacks have also affected civilian buildings and installations in rural Damascus and a few areas in rural Aleppo and Deir ez-Zor. This resulted in the death and injury of a number of civilians and military personnel, in addition to the material damage to public and private property. This comes in flagrant violation of international law, international humanitarian law, and the principles and purposes of the United Nations. These attacks coincided with attacks launched by terrorist groups and organizations active in northwestern Syria. They used drones against civilians in the city of Aleppo and rural Aleppo. The Israeli attacks also coincided with terrorist attacks carried out by the terrorist organization Daesh in the eastern areas of the country. This reaffirms the existing and ongoing coordination and distribution of roles between the Israeli occupation authorities and their terrorist proxies. Madam President, the Israeli occupation authorities would not have committed this aggression against a protected diplomatic headquarters, protected under international law, or an aggression against any other civilian objects, such as airports, ports, or residential neighborhoods, had it not been for the blind support of the United States. The latter has provided them for decades with an umbrella of sponsorship and impunity. This enabled them to commit the most heinous atrocities, the most recent of which is the genocide and the brutal crimes committed against the Palestinian people for nearly 6 months. Moreover, the US administration rushed to claim that the Resolution 2728 is not binding and does not impose any new commitments. This to absolve Israel from its implementation or implementing the ceasefire. It was a blatant disregard for the bloodshed of more than 33,000 civilian Palestinian. I repeat, 33,000, most of them women and children. This, in addition to more than 173 UNRWA official and dozens of others from humanitarian organizations. We have listened today to the Israeli targeting that killed 7 working in an NGO in Gaza. And this is a matter that the representative of the U.S. failed to condemn. The Israeli aggression also led to the killing of a number of journalists, in addition to the destruction of thousands of residential buildings, places of worship, health and educational facilities, including UN premises. My country, Syria, holds the war criminals of the Israeli occupation government and their partners in the United States administration fully responsible for these attacks and their repercussions on regional and international peace and security. They are also responsible for pushing the region to unprecedented levels of escalation and instability. Syria warns from any continued policy of such attacks. Syria calls on the United Nations to shoulder its primary responsibility in condemning the repeated Israeli attacks. The UN must act immediately to put an end to such attacks, prevent their recurrence, hold their perpetrators accountable, and ensure that they do not go unpunished. Syria stresses that the failure of the Security Council to fulfill its responsibilities due to the obstructive role of the United States undermines the system of collective security on which our organization, the United Nations, was founded. This leads member states to believe that it is useless to rely on the power of international law or international legitimacy to regain our rights. To conclude, Mr. President, the Syrian Arab Republic affirms that these attacks will not deter it from its national choices or its firm positions in support of the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination and the establishment of their independent state with Jerusalem as its capital. We will also continue our endeavors to recover the occupied Syrian Golan in full up to the line of the 4th of June of 1967. We will liberate all our territory from the illegal military presence and its proxies from terrorist organizations secured by the international law. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic.